I think it might be helpful for us to frame the scope of the problem that we're talking about and how big, how widespread it truly is. So, you may have seen some of the data and the research on it, but the estimated profit margins from human trafficking is $150 billion in US currency per year. That is the estimated amount they say that traffickers make in engaging in this crime. To put that in further perspective, if you take companies like Apple and Google and Facebook and combine the profit that they make in a given year, it doesn't match how much trafficking crime generates. In fact, next to drug trafficking, it's the fastest growing crime in the world today. In some ways, I think it's sort of like a medical epidemic, in that certain epidemics sneak up on us and moves quite quickly. It can be hidden, but also deadly. And I think that's been the case with trafficking. It's moved into our society at such a voracious rate and has become something that has taken over so many parts of our world today. So what I'd like to do with our panelists is maybe start with the broadest perspective and then try to move our way towards some of the more specific challenges that we face. So let me turn to the panelists to my right immediately here. This is Judge Eric Bradshaw. He is from California. He is a judge in the Superior Court, and he's been on the bench for the last 9 to 10 years. Judge Bradshaw, if you could just get us started, what do you think why do you think this trend is happening? And how much awareness do you think the public has when it comes to the crime of trafficking? I know that everyone here certainly understands what trafficking is because we're here at a trafficking conference, but what about the public at large?
That's a big question. And in a certain respect, we are sort of preaching to the choir here, but I can tell you that I attended a conference in San Diego on human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, in September. And it involved a number of agencies. The district attorney's offices were represented from multiple counties up and down California. The courts were represented. Social services was represented. Group homes were represented. Basically, everyone that collaborates to do this. And one of the amazing things that came out of that from my standpoint was as I'm listening to these probation officers and social workers and attorneys, both prosecutors, law enforcement people, one of the things that was very interesting to me was even within their own agencies, as much training as they get in California, which is actually, I would say, quite good, you still have people within agencies who don't spot it when it's right in front of them. So you can, awareness is obviously a key thing. And then the other aspect of this today, I think one of the points made on the video that was initially presented was that I think that actual statement was something to the effect of criminals are getting smarter with technology. I would say, as a trial judge for the past 10 years, criminals are not getting smarter. They're becoming more efficient with the technology, but they're not smarter. They're just as evil, and they're doing just as they find new and different ways to do what they need to do to make their money, and technology has given them a platform for that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I would like to turn next to Dr. Swati Bhattacharjee. You are the senior assistant editor for ABP. You have your PhD in social science, and I know that in the area, when it comes to just understanding what the social issues are that surround this, you've done quite a bit of research and study, and in fact have received a number of awards in relation to your work. So let me frame that question for you. What do you think are the factors that is making certain people more vulnerable? You know, how does a girl become so easily victimized?
Well, the fact is that a very large part of our population lacks income security, and girls, particularly girls and children, also lack social security. The two of these combined make them extremely vulnerable, and since you started off by saying that in this round of discussion you want to take on the larger perspective, perhaps I should make this point, which I feel very deeply, that while trafficking is an intolerable, inhuman thing, trafficking and the resulting sexual slavery, practically for children, it is actually one end of a very large range of situations in which children get pushed because of the insecurity in their families. We must remember that the child, the 13, 14, 15-year-old girl who is doing a double shift in a textile factory, who is not allowed to meet anybody, and who has no say over her own body or her own life or over her friends or even over her emotions, and finally commits suicide because she cannot bear such a life anymore, that girl really isn't in a much better position. Similarly, the child bride who is married off and has to bear 2, 3 children before she turns 18. So this entire lack of any control over one's body, any control over one's life, one's integrity, this complete alienation of our children from their own lives, their selves, this is something that is a huge failure for us as society, as nation, as humans. And we have to really think very hard how to do it.
So can I just follow up with you on that? So then, when it comes to the reporting behaviors, because you're saying that, you know, there's sort of a stigmas that attach to this. So when it comes to reporting behaviors, what are the challenges? And even specific to now, the added complication of technology-based exploitation.
When you say reporting, do you mean reporting by journalists or reporting to the police?
I know that you're a journalist, so I would love to hear from that perspective.
The problem is really that, like rest of the society, many journalists also tend to normalize this kind of abuse that is happening. And I would put in a note of critique here that many agencies like NGOs, like state agencies, whenever they do these awareness programs, they do it in big cities. But where is trafficking happening? It's happening at the borders, it's happening in small towns and villages. There, the reporter who is working there is much closer to the police because they're constantly reporting, doing the crime bit. And the police will always say that we have nothing to do, the parents are sending the children. Right? And the child is to be blamed because she is constantly fiddling with her mobile phone. Right? So this whole thing about the ways in which violations happen is not, there has to be a lot more sensitization of that absolutely at the level where this is to be reported. Unfortunately, both police and journalists in those areas are not very aware of, I wouldn't say aware, they know what is going on, but how to look at it is the question that we really have to face.
Thank you for that. Let me turn to MD Sharath here. He is the Deputy Superintendent of Police for Cybercrimes from the state of Karnataka. And I know that you have lots of experience when it comes to not just cybercrimes, but the broader area of trafficking in general. So Dr. Swathi just spoke about the fact that, you have the villages, where the trafficking starts, and then you have the cities, and then just the importance of trying to figure out where you do this awareness raising. And earlier today we heard about the borderless nature of the crime becoming because of online technology. Can you help us understand this for people who are not familiar with the world of organized crime? Help us understand what that means, this criminal network, and also, is there an interconnectedness that you're seeing? Is it just sex trafficking or child trafficking exclusively, or is it connected to labor trafficking and some of the other problems? Help us understand how these things operate.
Well, whatever we are seeing, you have to look at the trends which is coming up of late. The trends which are coming up now is basically on the information technology related issues. The platforms which you are having now, it is making things more organized as far as crimes are concerned. Now you look at any of the platforms, for example Facebook or WhatsApp, we are coming across a lot of cases where not only trafficking but also child pornography is involved, and irrespective of what you call the gender, the people are targeting them, criminals are targeting them. They are trying to extort not only money but also the pictures, selling it across. They are taking a lot of revenue out of that. To give a small example about one of the issues which I am currently dealing with. Now it's how transported nature of crime is happening. Now people, they create a Facebook page or a group or something like that. Then they they start grooming people. Now, all the students who are between 5th standard to 10th standard, so what happens is they mainly target major cities and they try to groom these students or children or whoever they are. And then once a friend request come from one of the pages, then they start multiplying their presence. They hack their page is compromised, their user IDs are compromised. After compromising their user IDs, they take the picture of their that person, they upload it on a different site. So what, as a police officer, we need to think about here is that he is trying to mislead the investigating agency with by hacking somebody else's account, and then he is posting the picture of that person. So we think that the early stages of the investigation shows that it has been misused by the criminal himself. But actually it is not, where the user has been given the access, the remote access to the desktops are given, laptops are given. Now you have multiple platforms where you can take access of your laptops or desktops. So from there they operate, then they are not leaving any trail behind where the police can investigate properly. So this again becomes a transporter nature of issue. So what happens, now we have been closely working with NICMEC. Okay, so they try to give us a lot of data, and when we started analyzing this particular data, we started to understand there's a lot of missing links in this. Apart from the data what they gave us, we tried to figure out a lot of other things were also missing in that. So that was the input which we gave it to them. So then we figured out that there is a trafficking issue there, and people from India have been sent across the border, like to Nepal or Bangladesh or somewhere like that, and it becomes very difficult. And we are also seeing certain cases where the SIM cards of other countries are being used here, and it is being used to call people. The traffickers are trying to groom people with those kind of numbers, and it becomes very difficult for the investigating officer or any police agency to look out for those kind of issues. And that's also the biggest challenge, where unfortunately, for the protection of the general public as such, the metadata in the Facebook page, whatever is there, they report this metadata. Now, what we try to do here is that whenever a trafficker uploads any picture or any CP content on any web page or anything, we try to analyze, do a forensic analysis of that picture and try to get hold of some data from that. Now here, because of the precautionary measure being taken by Facebook and other social media, now this kind of information is ripped off. We don't get that very vital information to investigate the case further. So this is also one issue where ultimately it leads to a lot of things. We have seen now, unfortunately, if you look at the metro cities in India, it's a very uncalled for situation which we are seeing as a current trend. Now, for example, if there is any relationship between a girl and a boy, for example, Now, there's an exchange of pictures which happen. Now, where are these pictures stored? These pictures are stored in a cloud, in a Google Drive or OneDrive or wherever. What if that particular drive has been hacked? I will show you you go to a lot of websites where a lot of user IDs and passwords are available of the live accounts which are still working live and kicking. You log into any account, no questions asked. So even Google has certain precautionary measures where if you have a different browser, it will ask for some alternative mechanism to log into that. But in spite of that, people tend to reset the password and either hack into it or send a fake call to the concerned person. A lot of things are happening, but the technology per se is giving us a hell lot of time, and we are making our policeman's life very miserable, and it is really becoming very hard for any policeman to investigate these kind of issues. And moreover, trafficking per se, it is very, very organized. Now WhatsApp has become a very common platform, and there are a lot of other platforms which people, even I don't know the names. So there are a lot of such platforms where people are into, and it is peer-to-peer communication and even encrypted also. So we can't get, even if we ask for a content. So what are the investigating agencies in India getting to investigate the case? They are only getting the metadata and not the content. So in order to investigate these kind of cases, the content is very important to understand what is happening and where it is happening. So now what we are getting on hand for investigation is only the metadata. So we have to juggle with only that. So these are the issues which we are still grappling with, and we are trying to come to terms with it, and also trying to figure out what are the better solutions we can come out with and do our best.
Seems like we're really just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding and just grasping the depth of what we're talking about here. Yeah. You mentioned this issue of cybersecurity, so let me turn our attention to Sebastian Edisheri. He is the director of cybersecurity for Deloitte. I know that you have quite a bit of experience prior to that. You spent 10 years with the CBI, 20 years with the armed forces, so you're quite familiar, I think, when it comes to the world of law enforcement investigation. But we're in a new era, we're in a new world when it comes to cyber crimes and forensic investigations. Can you help us understand what the challenges look like?
Yes, specifically when it comes to cyber forensics, challenges are so many, maybe, but some of them I'll list. Right? Maybe the first computer I had a chance to operate, it did not have even a hard disk. Maybe a floppy disk was used to boot. To save it, you needed another floppy disk. To start a program, you had another floppy disk. And maybe then I still remember the first computer I had which had a built-in hard disk. It had only 40 MB of data. But then I was thinking, what will I do with this 40 MB? And today, you have hard disks that are coming with minimum 1 TB hard disk for most of the computing devices. Now the challenge is to search and locate any evidence. The area to be searched is now, it has become something like an ocean. The size, because you need specifically a lot of time to search and locate evidence. Then in addition to that, most of the evidence storage are now happening in cloud or offsite locations. Then you cannot very easily have experts here. Say for in a conventional forensics, if you have to check a blood group, the formula remains same right from the beginning onwards. In digital forensics, you have 50 plus operating systems, and every day by day new operating systems are coming up or changes are coming to the operating system. So one particular evidence which till the previous version was lying in a particular area, in the new version it will not be there. So then you will have to wait, either you have to be very expert to go up to the zeros and one levels to locate it, or you have to wait for the update that has to happen in the forensic tools. So it is extremely difficult to have experts in forensics, especially when there are digital forensics, when there are so many areas to look at. Then, the moment you say forensics, traditionally what is thought that, okay, a crime is committed and a container of evidence is somewhere available with some person. But now most of the things have started moving into cloud. That way it is not one cloud. Let me just tell you one recent example. one guy who was actually involved in something sort of, not directly a trafficking case, but indirectly something related to that. He used a stolen credit card. He had a storage space which was purchased in one particular storage location, say Dropbox. He used, his applications all being run by an Amazon cloud service. His email is running from Microsoft. And all these things, think of a situation like Saras. If he has to go and collect evidence, how many agencies he will have to deal with? Dropbox, Amazon, Microsoft, and none of these storage devices are not available in India. He'll have to deal with international agencies. And that is one part. The second thing, by the time a complaint comes, it is normally something like anything between 30 days to 3 years, maybe it can be. And in India and most of the jurisdiction, the number of days by which till the evidence has to be stored, say for example, how many days a log has to be maintained, it is not more than 90 days. And by the time his crime is reported, it has come and ultimately a FIR has been lodged and investigation has to start. You have no more evidence because everything is overwritten now, nowhere it is stored. So what will you investigate? And when it is in cloud, and if it is not in the jurisdiction of that investigating agency, how will he go and seize it? Even when, how can he seize it? Why? Because it is something like a whole platform where there are so many people have been allocated. I can buy it for 5 minutes, I can buy it for 5 years. It's a very, very dynamic nature of that storage. So if I know that a crime was committed yesterday, by the time I reach today, probably that person would have already deleted his account or closed his account and gone. This space would have been allocated to someone and new data would have come in. So what will I recover from that? And how can I seize it? Because ultimately the whole container only can be seized. I cannot seize a part of that. Chain of custody. And NIST, that agency in US, has identified about 65 challenges that is associated with investigating in cloud for which there is no answers as on date. So if I have to say, I can say hours together about challenges, but these are some of the major challenges that is coming up in digital investigations. And one of the last ones, say for example, we all had started with storage media of magnetic media. These days you don't get any magnetic media device. And magnetic media offered recovery of even up to maybe 5 or previous overwritten contents. But these days, most of the recovery medias are coming in the solid state media. You may not even get once deleted stuff also, it may be very, very difficult to recover it. That is probably one of the last nail, which is creating a lot of problem for digital forensic.
It sounds like the work of law enforcement is just getting more and more complicated in this era. Let me get a perspective from the Netherlands. So if I can turn to Lida Van. Lida is a police officer with the Netherlands Police, has 11 years of experience. And part of that experience is investigating sex crimes. You're a detective there. Can you give us an insight into some of the challenges that you have faced when it comes to online exploitation crimes?
Yes, of course. I would like to divide them over 3 topics: anonymity, encryption, and the cross-border nature of the internet. So first, anonymity. It's quite easy for perpetrators to stay anonymous on the internet, to hide their true identity by using fake accounts, using prepaid mobile numbers, by hide their IP address with a VPN server. It's not impossible for us as a detective, but it costs more efforts to find the true identity. The other is encryption. With encrypted programs, files are blocked. It's also that computers nowadays are not hard disk oriented anymore, but network oriented, with the results that, for example, child pornography doesn't have to be on the computer anymore, but can be hidden in a cloud or server. And of course, it's also possible to watch it real life. And last but not least, the worldwide, the cross-border nature of the internet. so the internet is, that makes it the crimes is not bound to national borders. While the most of the investigations and prosecution are geographically organized. And I can give you an example from my experience that when we, for example, when I need to demand evidence by the social media platforms to prove a case, I need a rogatory or a legal request to get that evidence because most of the social media platforms are not based in the Netherlands. So that are a few challenges. One more challenge, which not fall under the three topics, but it's also real important enough to mention, is that for the Dutch police it's still not possible to wiretap WhatsApp calls, the content of WhatsApp calls and WhatsApp messages. So that's quite a safe area for perpetrators to use for the communication.
What about the possibility, Lida, of going down the track of financial investigations? Is that a challenge or is that an opportunity?
I think it's a great opportunity. In my opinion, money is the engine behind a lot of crimes. Without money, a lot of perpetrators won't be able to commit the crime. And without earning money, a lot of perpetrators won't be interested in committing the crime. So, from my opinion, financial investigations is a very important part of the whole investigation. I can share a bit about what we do in the Netherlands on financial investigation in sexual exploitation cases. Do you? Yeah, okay. First, we can calculate illegally obtained gains with the purpose to propose the judge to take off that money. And I think that's a great, the idea behind it is that I think that it's not fair when a perpetrator has earned money and after his conviction he's still in possession of that money. So I think that it's important to take off that money so that he is in the same status as before he committed the crime. The challenge in that is that we need a conviction for the head crime, so for example for human trafficking. So without a conviction for the head crime, it's not possible to take off that money. That's different with money laundering. Money laundering is in the Netherlands a crime on itself. So we can investigate that crime on itself, and we only have to prove that that money is not earned by a legal job or something, but is earned by a crime. And challenge in that is that nowadays it's a trend to use bitcoins for money laundering, what makes it much more complicated to investigate, because money laundering through, for example, buying a car is much more easy, and with bitcoins, the challenge is that they have used a bitcoin mixer, or that they have converted it in other cryptocurrency, or that they have used codes, passwords. So that's a third I would like to mention on financial investigation is that the tactical financial investigation, we can use financial investigation to prove a crime, so when there are transfers between two suspects, and we can also use it to locate, for example, a suspect. Each person leaves a lot of traces each day with regard to money. For example, by buying groceries in the grocery shop, or paying a parking tickets, or going to the ATM. And there are a lot of traces, and with the traces we can locate a suspect, also with future cases which we can demand by the bank. And the last one is that we have the possibility to seizure in order to preserve. And that possibility, with that we can seizure valuable objects of the suspect in order to preserve them in case the judge will decide to take off the money, the judge will decide to let the perpetrator pay the rehabilitation money or the damages to the victim. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful way of making the suspect responsible for his own deeds by letting him pay for the rehabilitation money and not letting it pay by the government. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah, as issues like anonymity and encryption become the buzzwords that police have to operate in, you know, you're looking for a different type of footprint, right, of individuals and trying to track that. Let me change gears a little bit and turn to you. This is James Collins. He's a sergeant with the police services in Canada. And so, James, I would love to understand as investigations are done. Now, we talked a lot about the technology and the sophistication that's needed, but at the core is still an individual that's being victimized. Tell me how you deal with the challenges, right? And I mean the individual victim in there when it comes to both engaging with them, the psychological well-being that the children who's been trafficked go through specifically when it comes to crimes facilitated by technology. How does police look at that aspect of this crime?
Thank you. I guess when we talk about sexual exploitation is sexual violence, and sexual violence, like any form of violence, can cause trauma. And we know that the best way to treat trauma is to deal with it as soon as we possibly can, so far as the time proxemics. Now, there are a lot of challenges so far as the police are concerned in obtaining reliable, valid information in order to remove the risk from that child, while also trying to protect society as a whole from those who profit from sexual exploitation. Now, we have to find a way to balance how we obtain that information for those two purposes against the mental health of that child. And when I address police for the very first time in recruit college, I perform a short exercise, and I'd like anyone to just follow along with us, is that I'd like you to close your eyes for just a quick moment. And I want you to remember the most recent intimate occasion that you've experienced, whatever that may look like. I want you to think about it in your mind's eye, and I want you to think about it in complete detail. Think about who it was with. I want you to think about who was there prior, perhaps who was there afterwards, what time of day it happened, maybe the month. I want you to think about what you felt, smelt, maybe even tasted. I want you to think about, in your mind's eye, everything that was said to you and the words that you've said. Now, when you have that memory in complete detail, you can open your eyes. And now I want you to think about relaying that information to me, a total stranger, in complete detail. Now, that's what we're asking our 6, our 7, our 8-year-old survivors of sexual violence to do.
I mean, that's nearly impossible to engage that way.
It is very difficult without addressing some of the initial challenges that we face early on in the investigation. So the technical crime that happens is still that sexual violence against that child. That child is brought into the stream of the investigation, and when we are trying to develop that information, we want to try and do that in a child-centered way, so that we're not compounding or minimizing the extra trauma to that child when they talk about the events that they've experienced. And we can't do that without recognizing the other challenges that are at play. Now, simple things like the way that we interview can be an impediment or create barriers to communication if we use a negative language set. So what I mean by that is this: if we term something as bad, as something that's a bad thing, what adults are trying to communicate with that child is that, yes, this should not have happened. We want to work with you. this shouldn't, let's get everything sorted away. But what a child will often hear is that what they have done or what they've been involved in is bad. And so it creates a barrier to communication that they don't want to talk about being bad. And so we run the risk of having an under-disclosed crime. And that may not lend itself well to completing the investigation that helps remove that child from, or the risk from that child, or protecting society as a whole. Now, the other thing too is that sometimes in our effort to find out why something happened, we ask those closed-ended questions such as, well, why did you answer that email? Why are you on the internet? Why did this person do that? And those are very complex constructs for young children to understand, and at the end of the day is ultimately irrelevant, because what we need to ask and the challenge of getting the information is more so developing open-ended questions such as, tell me about, explain to me, describe what happened next. Those will harvest more information, but it is a challenge because it's a difficult thing to hear a child talk about the sexual violence that they've experienced. And the challenge to investigators, of course, is to listen without causing a reaction to shut down the child's disclosure. And also to remember that it's very difficult for that child to talk about more so than it is for us to listen to. Now, of course, no matter where we are in this giant world, it is a worldwide phenomenon. And it affects us all in the same sort of way. And prior to the child interview, additional challenges that investigators face is to understand the two different constructs that are at play for this child, no matter how old the child is, and those are the social constructs or the family construct. You know, the social construct is just simply that how does this child view their community and the world around them? What are the expectations of the community of this child when they're away from home? Family constructs are slightly different. They are an interdependent relationship that the family members share, where it takes a little longer to develop. Now, both of these constructs can be challenged at the same time, but sometimes there are communities that have the extra construct of perhaps religious or spiritual overtones that also complicate that social construct. There are times where children, for lack of want, will try to do the right thing and disclose, but now what they're doing is they're giving their community something uncomfortable to digest, and often children will be removed from communities, okay? Or depending on who the offender is, the community may, without trying, identify with the accused rather than
Of course, yeah, there's an attachment that might happen, unfortunately, right? Yeah.
And then that construct as well can be challenged within the family, because if we're talking about a family member who is the perpetrator, now is that family unit whole in the way that is it creating a supportive environment for that child to come forward and then moving forward? And if investigators don't understand those constructs, well, that's great, we have the information, but we don't fully understand how best to integrate that child back into the family unit, if that's at all possible, or back into the community, which may be completely impossible depending on the family or the social construct. And so when we talk about those challenges in my community, where I am from, it's always preferred to have the social services or the professional mental health people front-loaded at the beginning, so they can start treatment, so they can start programming for that child or hopefully the family unit.
Right, okay.
However, it is very difficult because it's a specialized area, and the perception that they will spend a lot of time in court waiting to be called to give evidence as to what the child told them. So they spend less time away from their practice, less time with programming.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Has those other...
creating a cascading effect
Of course.
and reducing
Let
the
me
types.
turn here for a moment to Judge Bradshaw. Because we're talking about the problem from the front end, which is where the police have to start the investigation, get involved. But as a judge, you sort of see the final stages as well. What have you seen in terms of coordination between, because what we're talking about here is not just a problem for police, but also judiciary and social services, as you mentioned, James, the psychological side of it. What have you seen in terms of just coordination happening that's been helpful or effective?
Well, James raised a lot of points there that I could. He was touching a lot of points. When you look at the case when it finally gets to court, a lot of times in our community you lose your victim because the victims don't see themselves as victims. They want to get back out on the street. Many of the, if you're looking at, if we exclude the adult situation where there can be trafficking, if you're just talking about children, you have a situation where most recently I handled a preliminary hearing. This was about 6 weeks ago. 3 girls run away from a group home. 2 of them stayed with the person that they hooked up with that night, and for several days he was their pimp. Now, one girl had, why they all 3 decided to run away from the group home is beyond me, but it is beyond me. I don't understand that mentality at all. But, so one of the problems that you have, and James has really covered a lot of ground, you have girls that would run away from a group home, but you also have to ask yourself, okay, these girls are in a group home. And so, one of the issues that prosecutors and law enforcement faces is, even assuming you get past that interview and you collect your evidence, is that person still going to be around to be a witness during the trial? Because in a preliminary hearing, I can take the testimony in California, I can take the testimony from an officer to bind the person over and hold him to answer. But at the time of trial, I got to have that witness. So if you don't have the kind of case, and sexual exploitation of children comes in so many different forms. It can be where they're victimized out on the street corner or in a hotel room, or it can be sexually explicit material that, photographs, videos, and sometimes they're taking the pictures because they've been groomed properly, they're taking the pictures of themselves. So the perpetrator's fingerprints aren't even on the evidence. And then beyond that, the community, talk about juries, juries have a hard time understanding the story that this young lady is about to tell or has told. It's so incredibly horrific that somebody could be abused in the way they've been abused 7, 10 times a day over a period of time, and the, I'm going to say, torture that goes along with it. Juries have a hard time believing that, and who's telling them the story? And I know that this is probably not the correct language, but the juries see these, when those young ladies come up there and talk with their slang and their street language and their vernacular, you've got teachers and housewives and working folks.
It's 2 different worlds colliding.
It's 2 different worlds colliding, and those victims don't have a lot of credibility on the stand. It takes a long time to work with them, to get them ready to testify. And if you have, so there's this tension of law enforcement needing to dot I's and cross T's, courts having to process cases because, at least in California, you've got a right to a speedy trial, and if they demand that, that investigation has to be over if that person is demanding a speedy trial. And then, at the back end, the judge will sit back and look at it and say, what have we accomplished here? If the jury lets the perpetrator off because they didn't believe everything that the victim had to say. In California, there's aspects of the laws which I don't know how pervasive those are, but you have, it's a specific intent crime. In human trafficking, you have to have a specific intent to traffic these people and to abuse them sexually. Defenses like, I thought she was 18, it doesn't apply if they're in fact a minor, so we've taken care of that issue. Defenses of, well, she looked like she was 18, mistake of fact, that's not a defense. So we've eliminated some of the problem, but you can't get overcoming that hurdle where you're asking the part of community that would be on a jury to believe somebody that they can't relate to is a hard thing to do.
Shawat, if I can just turn back to you. It sounds like in the modern day, a police officer requires quite a bit of sophistication. I mean, you not only have to be excellent in terms of investigative work, but you also have to now understand the technology world involved. You also have to have an understanding of the law, obviously, on the legal side, but very much so now the psychology of the individual and the trauma and the right way to approach a potential victim and engage in that. Tell me what you see in terms of, because you do a lot of work when it comes to training, as I understand it. Tell me what you see in terms of some of the challenges or work that lies ahead in really trying to build the capacity of a frontline police officer to be able to really think in such broad terms.
Very, very challenging. The reason being that if people from India will definitely agree with me, that the frontline police officers are always overburdened with a lot of tasks. Okay, so their primary duty may not be investigation. So there are specialized agencies who are doing into the investigation kind of thing, but there are only couple of cases and not all the cases which comes to the police station as such. Now, training the police officers in technology, it's a really hard time because technology is catching up so much that every 10 days you have new technologies, new applications, new ways of committing crime, and, different ways of propagating crime as well. And you don't know what to, the day what I have taught probably in the month of January is obsolete now. So that's how we are. And for example, to quote some examples. Now, everybody knows that law enforcement agencies are heavily behind certain social media platforms. They want to shift it from there. So we don't know what are the platforms which are available. So the social media, the cyber world is not being monitored anywhere. So you don't have anything what is happening in the cyber world, and how many underground websites, applications are there, darknet applications are there. You don't know, you never know. They don't come up in the front as such. When you do a Google search, you never get it. So there are a lot of challenges. Making people understand how the dark web works itself is a big challenge. Okay, so they need to know about what is proxies, how these proxies work, and what is the Tor browser, and how this Tor browser works. So there are a lot of challenges, and moreover, any kind of digital investigation, any kind of investigation where information technology is involved, without a bit of forensic knowledge, it is impossible to crack the case. It's impossible. Unless you have then and there ground support. You should be having you are seizing the digital media right in the spot, and you are getting the result here, then and there. You are fine and you are comfortable. If it is going to take years together, you are not going to head anywhere. So, for example, what happens, what's the Indian scenario here? Let me be very frank. All the police guys, please excuse me for this. But, but the thing is, when you see the digital media, I send it, we don't have the expertise under Section 79A of Information Technology Act. The examiner of electronic evidence has to be notified by the central government. So the central government notified agency is the Central Forensic Science Laboratory. So I send it to either State Forensic Science Laboratory or Central Forensic Science Laboratory. What is the waiting period there? It's more than 6 months, 7 months, 1 year, more than a year. The moment I get that evidence here back for revisiting the same facts again, what is the data holding mechanism and rule in India which the ISPs or MSPs hold, for example, mobile service providers or internet service providers hold, it is only 365 days. If you want the data for 366th day, you forget it. It's not going to happen. So these are all various challenges which is there. And even police do understand. Now, for example, when do the victim come and tell you that you have been abused? After 3 months? 6 months? Then what is your line of investigation?
Right.
You have already lost a lot of credible information which is there.
Yeah.
And you are catching up with the time. 365 days is nearing you. And you have to catch up with that. So it is not going to happen. So, and training people, see, any information technology based crime, what we teach people, what we train the frontline officers is, the moment you receive a complaint, you have only 5 days with you. Whatever you have to do within those 5 days. Get all the data, get a dump of all the data in front of you, then you do a deep dive of it and do an analysis of it. So if you are trying to be a bit lax in that particular area, you are gone, you are taken for a toss. So this is one thing which we always tell them. The moment any police officer comes to us for training, we tell them that the information gathering aspect should be as quick as possible, and you should be capable enough to identify the places where you are getting these kind of data and how you are extracting it from that. That's very important.
Okay.
So these kind of challenges are always there. Now people come to us who don't know what's a keyboard.
Yeah, right.
So how do you teach them what's a computer and what to investigate in that, right? So that's also a challenge.
Thank you. Let me do this. We have a little bit of time. If there's questions that people have out here, we'd love to hear those questions. There's a hand raised. Can someone bring a microphone over to the front over here? Right here in the front.
I am Nirmala, chairperson of the Child Rights Commission, Tamil Nadu. One inference I would like to bring, and then another, there is a problem with us, is there are child care institutions in the area where there are heritages, and then where the tourist attraction places. In 2 places we have already identified some of the children were sexually abused. But we also want that we should have a surveillance of all such child care institutions which are in the tourist area. What had happened is, it is not that we have found out and other things. Media's reported when we found out that there were sexual abuse. Then all the medias, everybody started talking about how it happened, who are all the failures, this, that, everything. But the people who owned that institution have not at all been booked seriously. They have been scot-free, number one, or otherwise after and there is like this perpetrators of POCSO cases. These people also has to be to be monitored, because most of the time they have been scot-free. And another thing is, if the children are trafficked from some other area, if we have found out, after 14 to 15 years, they have, if they have caught in, say, Tamil Nadu, then they shifted to another state. From that state also, if we investigate, after 15, we don't know what is the fate of those children. So it is better we should have some kind of surveillance and monitoring of these type of people.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, those are good challenges to point out. There's in the corner over there. She has a question. Yes. And if it's a question, let us know who you want to answer that.
Yes, definitely. I have my question, actually two questions I have. One, either of Mr. Sebastian or Mr. MD Sharad can answer. And the second question is particularly for Mr. Sharad. The first question is, as we all talk about these challenges, in Indian perspective, as I'm a journalist from India and specifically from Kolkata, I would like to know that what you want the law enforcement agencies or the lawmakers to do certain laws. I mean, certain acts or certain laws you want, like for FOSTA 2018 in USA. That sort of act you want to get a more hold on digital platforms or digital media, so that you have a law or an act for your backup where you can walk in. What kind of act you want, number one. And number two is, as you said, Mr. Sharad, that the time is a very important factor in this kind of a situation. So for a victim, what should be the golden period to get come out and complain, and what you would suggest? I mean, 3 months, we all know that 3 or 6 months they come out, I mean, very late. But what, according to you, would be the best time for them to come out and report or book this person and talk about it? Thank you.
So I'll answer the first part. There is a concept called forensic readiness in the investigation areas. So that means you should have things in place to investigate or give support for the investigation already, so that tomorrow if an incident comes or incident has already happened and you come to know about the incident later, you can rely upon those evidence pieces. Say for example, on the roads these days, you have a lot of CCTVs. In current scenario in internet and especially on the cloud environment, it's a win-win situation for cloud service providers as well as criminals. So I'll explain both the things. For a criminal, mostly he uses either a stolen credit card, things, etc. for buying cloud storage, so that if an investigation starts, it will not connect to him. And how service providers are benefited is, currently there is no need for maintaining logs. Because there is no need of maintaining logs, they need not to separately earmark a mechanism for capturing of logs related to a particular user's activity. So if there is a forensic readiness type of platform wherein all users are required to maintain, user activities details are required to be maintained by cloud service providers, that can be subsequently become a major boon for the investigating agency. But in India currently, most of the cloud service operators are not operating from India. So the rules should be available to support investigation in India, wherein anyone providing such service, at least for the India part, should have legal binding in which they need to maintain all the logs, maybe 90 days, 180 days or 360 days. That can be a big boon for the investigators.
To add to what Sir said, yesterday I was in a VC with the MHA, all the states were in the video conferencing, and right now, one more VC is going on with the MHA and all the stakeholders of the state across India, where how coordination can happen and what are the better things to be done to improve the cyber patrolling mechanism. So that's going on. So it's in the pipeline, and probably very soon we'll see major changes with respect to a lot of things. That's one part. The second part, how quickly he has to come and report. Immediately. so the more
faster the better.
Yeah. More the delay, lot of loss of data, lot of evidence, whatever is there, and what we can gather from them. See, it is the interviewing a victim is very critical and very sensitive. The reason being, they don't know what to be told, and we need to extract from them, and they are in such a tender age that asking them few straightforward questions may hurt them. So we have to keep their parents, we have to keep their guardians together, and then we have to ask those questions. And they are also not comfortable in answering those kind of questions when we are asking them. So whatever is the scenario, but they have to come and report it to us as early as possible, so that we can get hold of a lot of information before proceeding with the investigation.
Thank you. There's a question right there.
Sir, my English is not good, so I speak in Hindi. I have one. मेरा एक यहाँ पे वेस्ट बंगाल में एक टूरिस्ट प्लेस है. टूरिस्ट प्लेस में पहले लड़कियों का धंधा खरीद फरोख्त होता था, वो होटल में रख के. अभी उसको पैटर्न चेंज कर लिया. जब उसको पुलिस वाला ने रेड किया और उसको पकड़ हुआ, अभी क्या करते हैं उन लोग, लड़कियों को सीक्रेट प्लेस में रखते हैं. सर स्पेशली आपके लिए आप थोड़ा ध्यान दीजिएगा. लड़कियों को सीक्रेट प्लेस में रखते हैं और क्लाइंट को मोबाइल के व्हाट्सएप के जरिए दिखाते हैं ये अवेलेबल है, यू वांट दिस, अब अगर चाहिए तो मैं अभी 1 घंटा में, आधा घंटा में आ जाता है. ये थोड़ा क्राइम का पैटर्न थोड़ा चेंज कर लिया है. ये मेरा एक एक्सपीरियंस था, शेयर किया आपसे. थैंक यू.
Right in front.
I have just one question for Mr. M.D. Sharad. You were already talking about how, I mean, when digital evidence has to be certified by an examination or by the Central Forensic Sciences Laboratory. Now we know that in India that doesn't happen very fast, and also often the evidence as a consequence gets tampered and the entire investigation comes to a halt. In a larger perspective, online trafficking also happens across the states between one state and another. So there is also a lot of collaborative work with the cyber departments of other states' polices. I mean, how do you handle such an entire gigantic framework and still complete the investigation on time? I mean, what's the effective way of doing that?
See, basically, even though legally, if you go by the framework of law, nothing may happen quickly. So unofficial contacts with our peers who are there in other states, other countries, we try to, we request them. I have shared, he has shared a couple of experiences, Mr. Sebastian, where we had to share certain data between Nepal and India, Bangladesh and India. So we have done that. So this happens on a unofficial basis. If you go on an official basis, that is called letter of request. Judge knows very well what happens to a letter of request. At least in India, for that document to generate from this table and to reach the other shore, it will take 1 year. Forget about coming back. So coming back is a myth and a miracle. Okay. So that's how it's been. No, this is not only the experience of India. This has been experiences overall, all over the globe. So letter of request, derogatory, that's why the Budapest Convention is coming up, and everybody is trying to understand what are the concerns of Budapest Convention, how the data sharing mechanism can happen. A lot of these issues are there. Now, only unofficial contacts work better, and we are looking for some clues. Okay, if those clues are available to us for investigation, we are done. Thank you.
Well, we are out of time.
Sure. I have a question, sir. So may I ask a question? Not a question. May I want to know, sir, broad sir, from being a prosecutor, I couldn't ask any question to the learned judge. May I know from that broad sir? Thus, here the problem is sexual exploitation in digital era. Digital era, it's a globally. Why not a global legislation way to deal with such a problem from the UNO? Why not? Why one of the state? How this one of the state by making any law and combat with such a problem? It's a global problem. Why not global legislation is made to deal with this problem? That's I would like to know, sir.
Very good, very good, very good. Very good.
Well, let me do this. Let me sort of frame it up. You make a very valid point, right? How do we deal with an issue that is of global nature? Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we have to move on. That's of global nature when we have laws that are particular to a particular state or a country, but it's not applicable in another location. So what does that look like? I just want to let you all know that the way that we had done this session was really to sort of pull out those challenges, right? The role of this panel today, so I don't want to leave you all discouraged, is not to sort of identify what the solutions are. We have some phenomenally both trained and involved people on this panel here who are actually working through those challenges and are finding solutions. And there is actually success happening. There is actually criminal networks going down. There is momentum. There is gain. There are girls who are rescued who are actually overcoming their trauma and being rehabilitated. There are social stigmas that are no longer continuing to operate and reign, but they are coming down. They are changing because the thinking is changing. I know that we have the risk of the fact that in our hands is the very thing, our phones, through which all this sort of risk comes at us. There's no way, as somebody said, we can live without this. We need this. And so the criminal networks are able to reach in right into our very worlds, and that can be scary. But the purpose of this session is really to be able to frame for you the depth and breadth and length of what the challenge looks like and what the fight is that is before us. And ultimately what this means is this. This is going to be a collaborative joint effort of multiple public justice system institutions, multiple states, multiple countries, and we're going to have to put our best thinking and put our best foot forward, because criminals are working around the clock to try to find a way to exploit the vulnerable and make a maximum amount of profits. And so we have to be just as resolute in making sure that we are determined and working hand in hand together to solve that. And let me just close with this quote that I want to share by Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa. He had said this. He said, "Safety and security don't just happen. They are the result of collective consensus and massive public investment. We owe our children and the most vulnerable citizens of our society a life free from violence and fear." Would you just give a round of applause to these excellent panelists that were here? Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Matthew, and of course, all the members of the panel. We break for tea, and we are going to be back at 4:30 sharp. We would be sort of witnessing a very, very beautiful event that is going to take place where survivors of trafficking would actually walk with some of the stars of Bengal. So do come back for that sharp at 4:30. Enjoy your tea. But before that, Shamirul Islam Polak from Bangladesh is going to recite a short poem.
Om Trambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Uruvarukamiva Vandanat Mrittur Mokshi Mamamaman Edulok Mudhumoy মধুময় পৃথিবীর ধুলি অন্তরে নিয়েছি আমি তুলি এই মহামন্ত্রখানি চরিতার্থ জীবনের বাণী দিনে দিনে পেয়েছিনু সত্যের যা কিছু উপহার মধুরসে ক্ষয় নাই তার তাই এই মন্ত্রবাণী মৃত্যুর শেষের প্রান্তে বাজে সব ক্ষতি মিথ্যা করি অনন্তের আনন্দ বিরাজে শেষ স্পর্শ নিয়ে যাবে যবে ধরণীর বলে যাব তোমার ধুলির তিলক পড়েছি ভালে দেখেছি নিত্যের জ্যোতি দুর্যোগের মায়ার আড়ালে সত্যের আনন্দ রূপ এ ধুলিতে নিয়েছে মূরতি এই জেনে এ ধুলায় রাখিনু প্রমতি
Dancer and choreographer who, after a long span of arduous career, now is introduced in film choreography. His talent is not only recognized in Bengal, but also in Bangladesh. His expert choreography will be showcased in a recent film starring Rituparna Sengupta and Babul Supriyo. He has several awards and accolades in his kitty for his expertise in Odissi dance style and innovative work in choreography. His troupe, Prayas is groomed with undivided attention by him over many years. This troop supports economically challenged talents and make them financially independent by integrating them in mainstream performing arts under the able tutelage of Obhirup Sengupta. Currently, he is supporting the children and youth with special abilities and helping in their learning and wellness with the help of performing arts. These children, under the tutelage of Obhirup Sengupta, is invited over to many organizations to be a part of their special performance. His talent is taking him to new vistas, and with his helpful heart, he is leading many to a successful career in performing arts, especially dance and choreography. In today's performance, Amar Bangla, he is performing with his professional troupe and young talents. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Obhirup Sengupta for you. Bengal or Bangla, the magical land of natural wonders, art and culture, rich heritage of food and history, wondrous mountains, green valley and expansive seashores. Bangla, our Bengal, has a different flavor of life. Here, we experience the love of life and the richness of success. Bangla, our heritage, our pride. We pray to be born here again and again. The people of Bengal celebrate with heart and our soul. Our soul is thus purified with the essence of all-inclusiveness. The word Ma resonates with the feeling of love and care and a sense of belonging. Ma also symbolizes the strength of women and brings to the core of Nari Shakti, Ma Durga, a celebration of strength, courage, power, and above all, just as a mother loves all her children equally, a sense of inclusiveness, pureness. Bengal was physically divided in 1947, but hearts stayed connected. The language was as sweet as ever, written in the folds of his various dialects. The poets like Rabindranath, Nazrul, Dijendralal, Shukanto, and various other authors, writers, artists all wrote from the heart with the language of hearts. Together, they bring out the folk tradition, which emerged as one major bonding between two Bengals. Agumoni Bijaya, Baul, Bhatiali, Dhamali, Gombhira, Kobigan, Moimun Singho Gitika, Sharigan, and composers like Lalon Fokir, Hashun Raja all embrace the love of Mati or the land. Banglar Cholachitra, Bangla films. The flavor of the people of Bengal, from masters like Satyajit Ray, Hrithik Ghatak, Mrinal Sen, and the classically talented platter of actors with their astounding talent, Uttam, Suchitra, Soumitra, Savitri Devi, Utpal Datto, to name a very few. We have been blessed with talents and maestros to create celluloid wonders representing Manush, or people of Bengal. We celebrate the talent of Shri Satyajit Ray with his compositions to the olden golden time of Bengali films, Bangla Cholachitra.
আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, শাখে শাখে পাখি ডাকে কত শোভা চারিপাশে, শাখে শাখে পাখি ডাকে কত শোভা, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, শাখে শাখে পাখি ডাকে কত শোভা চারিপাশে, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে।
শুধু গানের দিন এলো গুণগান
Bangla, a flavor of the soil, of the people, and the community life of rural Bengal, is a major part of Bangla, Bengal, and our culture. The songs of Gram Bangla or rural Bengal are joyous expression of the social celebration of various relations that builds a sustainable society, committed towards living their lives through wellness. Our next presentation is a folk song of such a playful depiction of rural lives, Sundari Kamala. We conclude our program with nothing less than the biggest honor to us all. Bangla, our land, and Bangla, our language. Kavi Guru Rabindranath Tagore and his exemplary penmanship reflected in our national anthem. We, the Bengalis, are proud to be his heritage and the very land where our anthem was conceptualized and worded. The song has 5 stanzas. We present the unknown verses, which is not a part of our anthem. People, populace, and their hearts, all are bound together in the thread of our great land and democracy.
Really, good evening everybody. This is really our privilege to perform here in this kind of venture, occasion, whatever we can say. And I would like to thank the organizer, Anunnati, Philip sir, and Shomudi for all kind of support. I just want to take 2 minutes to introduce my students with you. Chandrima, Avishikta, Rohini, Obhirup, he is from Bangladesh, Dhaka, he stays there. Ipshita, Devika, Ishita, Shreya, Pooja, Rishita, Srijata, Nivedita, Shahajonna, Triparna, Akash, Orchisha, Ayan, Sundar, Orgho, Piyash, Sanchi, Sania, Avantika, Anita, Shampurna, Taposhi, Sanjukta, and Shonchita. And one more artist from Dhaka, Samimul Islam Pulab. He also performed the poetry. And thank you so much for your love and support. Hope we'll do more better performance in future. Thank you all the technician person for their kind help. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Obhirup Gupta, for presenting this wonderful display. May I request Mr. Saju Matthews to felicitate Obiru on behalf of IJM. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Madhumanti Di, and thank you, Shudesh Nadi also.
And finally, the much awaited walk. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this particular walk is Bengal. And therefore, all the clothes, every piece of clothing reflect Bengal aesthetics, which has been conceived and created by a very well-known designer of not only Bengal, of our country in general, Ogni Mitra. And right now, what we are planning is, in fact, in Bengali, in Bangla, we call this walk Tarar Shonge Tara. Tara in Bengali, many of you may not know, who do not follow the language. Tara means star on the one hand, and Tara is also a pronoun which is synonymous with they, them. So the interpretation is left to you. They with the stars, then who are the stars here? The much vetted, the well-known, the eminent stars in their own fields, and also they, the stars who are hidden behind a veil, but some people who have the fight in them, who have survived, who have went through ordeals and have come out victors. So they are stars in their own right.